Okay, we can begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Your choice between rational and real here on Fragments of Silicon.
All right. Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam, and joining me, as always, are Ogre,
YOLO.
Petty Fan,
Hey, Liv.
Twilight,
Yo,
and Galix.
Hello.
Let's see who to go first this week. Uh, Petty Fan, why don't you start us off?
Well, Monday night, I guess technically beat Nier Automata. And by technically, I mean I got
Like
the
first ending.
C and D endings, which are the technically canon ends.
Ah.
So I guess I can now go through and get the rest of the joke endings if I so desire, or go download the DLC. So that's 13
How about the
bucks.
ending where every machine is actually powered by a hamster wheel and the hamsters are developing sentience?
Don't give Yoko Taro ideas.
It's not a Silent Hill ending.
This is pretty close. Well, one of the joke endings is really easy to get. I think all you have to do is unequip your what's the word? Operating system.
Yeah, and there's also one for self-destructing in the base thing, which is kind of funny. But yeah, outside of that, still waiting for my replacement phone to come in. That's been joyous.
Would have thought you had that by now.
Um, it might have come in today because I think somebody tried to call me, but they didn't leave a number, so I'm probably gonna call them tomorrow morning, and then we'll probably pick it up Monday. Um, aside from that, not a whole lot's been happening on my end. Well, I
All right.
guess next person.
Twilight.
not much been going on this week. Had a friends and family outing during the weekend for Memorial Day. Besides that, I got a new TV on clearance sale. From, and that's about it. Besides playing games for the show and such. So, Galix.
I am slightly concerned because it is thundering outside right now. Other than that, I had a very uneventful Memorial Day weekend because, like, the two things I normally do on the weekends, my Pathfinder game was canceled because nobody else was going to be able to be there, and my the card game thing I've been going to, I couldn't go to because my parents were going to a funeral out of state for my dad's uncle, I think.
Hmm.
Not someone I was very close to, but so I had to stay home for that day. I bought another game Humble Bundle the other day, which is I think for Adult Swim games, because a few of them were on my wish list, honestly, like Duck Game was, and then some of the other ones were ones we've reviewed before because we've reviewed several of their games, and we usually only get one code, so I figured that wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, Adult Swim been pretty consistent on the one code thing.
I technically beat Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap on the Switch. Everything except for the Mouse's Unknown area, because fuck the Mouse's Unknown area. It would probably be easier if I had a pro controller with a good D-pad, because then you can do the sticking to ceiling things a little more easily, but I've never been good at bouncing blocks. Other than that, I think it's been pretty quiet.
Right. So Ogre, you're up.
Well, we're getting close to finishing. Almost call it sticker star, color splash.
Sticker splash.
I wouldn't give them too many ideas on that one.
Yeah.
Got about one more recording session, then we should be done. Unless we got cleanup stuff to do.
Yeah, how long have you guys been on this game?
I don't know. I think since March.
February.
Holy shit.
February? Wow.
Wow.
You've
It's
been
a lot
working
longer
on-
than I expected it's been.
Yeah, I suppose that begs the question if you're still planning on doing that other big project you were planning to do this year, or.
I have no fucking clue at this point.
Well, I mean, it's more a question of like, burnout than anything else.
No. If this weren't as big as it were, I'd probably stick with the plan, but I kind of have to adjust now.
That's kind of what I was figuring,
Yeah.
because I'm like,
'Cause I don't like to do bigger games like this and more than at least once a year. And unfortunately, RPGs tend to be really big games like that, so
well, I'm sure you'll figure it.
that's why we probably won't get till Chrono Trigger till like 2021. So let me see. Any other news, real quick? Did that? I'm going to get next week. We discuss over more properly about a new hard drive for my computer, since I'm pretty sure this one is starting to go
Hooray.
yeah, which of course means I have to get get like Windows 10 for it, since it's going to be in clean install.
10 isn't bad.
Yeah, I like 10.
I don't think 10 is bad at this point. It's just that I'm kind of annoyed I have to get 10 to do the clean install, but what are you gonna do? At this point, anyway. And last bit of final news is that I finally beat Alexander last night.
You're not a scrub anymore.
Yeah. Knock and I joined the rest of our people in the free company, and after a few longer minutes of throwing our heads to the wall, finally won in the most slapdash way of like, everyone's dying. No!
I think that might be the dirtiest one I've ever seen on that fight.
Yeah. My favorite was when we killed him the second time, and just before he hit me with the lasers, he died.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got 3 wins. I got almost all my tank stuff I need. I just need the axes left. And I got some Dragoon pieces. Naka got the monk body piece. And we both got our flying mounts that are basically just minions of Alexander. So not only do we kill him off, but we steal his minions from him.
I was about to say they work for us
What
now.
kind of minions?
Mechanical, weird things that once you start going into flying areas, they grow wings.
Oh, okay, because I was going to say, Alexander's a castle dude.
Because they're technically part machine and part heavenly entity. Because Alexander likes to do time magic. So he gets a little screwy with that. So really, I'm set for Stormblood at this point for my tank, so yay. And we all got a bunch of information dump on all the new job stuff.
Samurai is looking nice.
Samurai really looks like it's from 11, but more adjusted for 14, so.
I hit things real good.
Which I'm assuming we'll discuss more in next week's time. Which would be Adam's chance to catch up on sleep or anything.
Like next week.
Week
you're
after,
talking-
possibly.
Yeah, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Next week's usual stuff. 2 weeks is E3.
Okay. The weeks are starting to blend in because it's still fucking May. Tomorrow it's June. But for some reason it's still fucking May. But that's pretty much about it for me. So Adam, you're about the only one left.
Not much going on. Mainly because it's hot as fuck outside.
Yeah, I gotta imagine you're the one who suffers the most when it comes to summer in this group.
Well, that's Florida for you.
Well, the thing about Florida compared to other places, I mean, and I'm not going to say that Florida isn't the worst.
Right.
In Florida, the air conditioners are fairly compulsory.
Yes. Well, it's not just like the fucking heat. It's because it's always humid.
Yeah, no, I know.
Like, geez.
I just wish air conditioners were compulsory up here because it definitely gets to air conditioner temperatures.
I mean, you would think after so long.
Yeah. That's why. Just going outside, I think it was in the mid 90s today.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's like.
I don't know. We haven't creeped up past to like the high 80s for a while, but it's still been kind of out here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Outside of that, not. Like I said, not a lot going. I think the summertime is actually when things kind of slow down because it's so hot.
At least until people get there for vacation, which is stupid, but people do.
Yeah, that's not happening until October. Like,
yeah, I know. The best time to vacation in Florida is like winter or spring.
Yeah, it's like. I mean, there's a term for those kind of people down here called snowbirds because
speaking as where they come from, I'm familiar with it.
Well, not everybody might be familiar with it. It's like, but yeah, it's like they come down in October and they leave in April. So everything around is really quiet. And I don't miss the increased traffic. So with that inanity out of the way, narrowly we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And this week we have Joseph Tringali of Digital Continue.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
No problem. How are you doing today?
Doing good. I'm excited you guys are talking about Stormblood.
Oh, we have another one with us.
I'm waiting, I'm waiting. The Paladin's ready.
Yes, brother.
I was watching this video. They had some videos came out today. They were showing the class changes and some of the new skills.
That's what I've been watching almost all of them.
Yeah.
That's gonna take a while to get to the other ones.
Yeah.
All right. So before this descends into a Final Fantasy XIV discussion, all right. We like to start our interviews by getting to know the people behind the game, the studio, and so on and so forth. And we like to start things by learning where their passions for video games first started. What got you interested in the medium?
Oh, like making video games or playing video games?
Playing both, actually.
I played, man, my first video game is probably in television. Back in like the early 80s, my parents had one. I was probably like maybe 4 or 5 years old. And then NES, SNES. I wouldn't say I was like a hardcore gamer as a kid. Like video games are kind of part of a bunch of stuff that I did. But I think probably Final Fantasy VII in high school was like the first game that I was like, this like kind of got interested in how they got made. And then I played a lot of EverQuest in high school and early college, and then at that point I was started seriously thinking about making it a career.
And did you go to university for that?
I did not. It was this is a while ago, probably like 15, 16 years ago. So the universities like that exist today didn't exist back then.
Right.
So I applied for a like a game master job for an MMO called Anarchy Online, which is like yeah, back early 2000s, and it's kind of my first job in the industry. And I went to work in Hong Kong on a MMO as like a associate producer, and then came back and started Fifth Cell in 2003. And so the vast majority of my career was with Fifth Cell.
Hmm. And what prompted you to found or co-found Fifth Cell?
So I was in Hong Kong and watching people there play games on their mobile phones, and so I connected with a friend of mine. We kept in touch and was asking him if people back in the States were playing games on their phones, and he said no. So I was like, hey, like it's only a matter of time before it happens. So maybe we should, start a company and make phone games. And so we did that, and that was Fifth Cell. And then we eventually ended up doing DS and 3DS, Wii U, and a bunch of stuff.
All right. I suppose before we move to that, this is 2003, 2004, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So the question that beckons is, what was it like making mobile phone games back in what was essentially the primordia of mobile gaming?
It was awesome. Like I felt like you know how a lot of people talk about how they made video games back in like the 70s and 80s when like there was nothing, like you had like 6 colors and one control that you could use. Like mobile phones back then, I think it was like 64 kilobytes of total space for your art, your code, your sound, like everything. And so basically it was like I remember one game I worked on, I would go in and have to edit like actual characters in sentences to get the file size below 64 kilo. It was like 64.2 kilobytes, and so I'd have to go and like take out words and punctuation and like just to kind of get it under that limit. But it was fun. It required you to do a lot with very little.
Sounds like it. And like what kind of games did you make during that time?
We made some cool games. We made like a Puyo Puyo like puzzle game. We made a sort of like a side scrolling like Tower D, which was actually a mini game in the original Lock's Quest for the Nintendo DS. That was like one of our first mobile games. And then a sort of like a so it was like a military squad management game where you were like SEAL Team 6 people and you went around rescuing hostages.
I'm trying to think if I might have played any of these, but
as there was a like Nokia Series 4060, a long time. It was before smartphones.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think I had a Nokia during that time frame. Like, honestly, Nokias weren't really much of a thing here. Like, in comparison to, say, like, Europe, Asia. But, so, what prompted the transition from mobile gaming to the DS?
I think so the mobile market is probably like 05-ish, 06. It changed a lot. It went from sort of like it went from heavy licenses to like heavier licenses, I guess. And so like there was a period of like a couple years until smartphones started coming out where it was really hard to do original IP. And we had started the company, like we really wanted to do original IP. And so, we looked at what other, smaller platforms were around and successful at the time. And, we were looking at handhelds, and, the DS had just come out, I think. And so we decided to make games for that.
And well, what was it like making games for the DS in comparison to the mobile phones of the age?
A little bit better. We had 32 megabytes instead of 64 kilobytes. So
that's actually quite a jump.
It was quite a jump, but like nowadays Yeah, it's ridiculous sometimes. Like I talk to people on the team, and it's like gigabytes, and I'm just like, mind is blown. I'm just like, man, like to have that space. So yeah, space is at a premium. But you could do a lot more. I mean, Nintendo's always optimized their systems, even though the specs have been lower. Like, they're built to run games pretty well. So it was a great system.
Well, before we venture further down the Nintendo DS, do you regret not sticking it out with the mobile market with the advent of the smartphones?
No, I mean, you know, like I think we had a lot of success on DS, and there was games that we made on DS that it wouldn't have been possible to make on mobile phones, or at least like the original hooks we had wouldn't have appealed, I think, to mobile users. So no, I think DS is like easily top 5, top 3 systems of all time for me. Ton of great games.
Makes sense, given that the popularity of the DS in the late 2000s. But on the flip side of the coin, did you ever consider doing anything for the PSP?
Yeah, we did actually. But it was like, I don't know, like PSP at the time was, was sort of positioned as like, PlayStation Lite, where they were still, people were looking for 3D content. So, we were traditionally like a 2D studio. Like we had a lot of good 2D resources. And so, we sort of gravitated more towards the DS.
Makes sense. Although I will say there was a lot of fantastic 2D content on the PSP.
There was, yeah. A lot of it came later. But,
yeah.
I mean, we were sort of on the cutting edge of both those platforms. And, you have to make a call, what your studio is going to support.
Right. And so I believe the first game Fifth Cell did for the DS was Drawn to Life, correct?
Yep.
Now...
Oh, man, I remember that one, at least vaguely.
Yeah. Yeah, Drawn to Life was kind of the forerunner to Scribblenauts, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it was our first DS game, and it sort of started the what we did was just innovate, create sort of gameplay hooks and experiences that hadn't been done before, in the way that we did it. And so, Drawn to Life is all about, drawing your hero, your avatar that you played with, and drawing parts of the levels, and yeah, it's a ton of fun. Probably my like fondest game memory. Like it was like the last. I mean, I worked on Lock's Quest a bit as a dev, but Drawn to Life was really like the last game I actually worked on like as a dev before I went more into like the publisher, like the management, communication, producer-y stuff. So I wrote a lot of the story, did a lot of the scripting. We had a very small team back then, so it was a lot of fun.
I imagine it didn't require that much in the way of resources to develop a DS game.
No, not really. Nothing compared to games. Although nowadays, there's a lot of great teams with only a couple people. So industry has kind of come full circle.
True enough. And now, did the concept of Drawn to Life come from wanting to make the best use of the DS's features? Because I do remember, it's a game that's pretty like tailored for that platform.
Yeah, I think all our DS games were sort of made for the platform. Like the way we used to approach, game design is, we would first look at, sort of the platform that we wanted to make it for, and then we looked at what that platform did well, and we sort of built the game, designed the game around that. And that it didn't necessarily need to be like, the actual mechanics of the platform. It could be the audience, it could be like specific things that the audience is playing, but it definitely, like, our games were always suited for very specific platforms.
I can definitely see that, considering all of what Fifth Cell released, especially on the DS.
Yep.
And moving forward, well, before we go into conversation, perhaps this is a good point to show off some footage because we will be returning to Locke's Quest here.
All right, which one do you want me? Would you want me to run the trailer?
Well, we're on the DS version, so we should show off the DS version.
All right.
Just make sure to have the correct attribution notes and such. So
I will put that in the description of the highlight since I have no room on the overlay.
fair enough.
So yeah, it's running on mute right now. So if you want to talk while this is going,
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We'll save the audio for the actual trailer.
yep.
So Locke's Quest here is another really interesting game. Like, it's a hodgepodge of various genres. Although I think at its core, it's an RTS tower defense game. Where did the idea for this game come from?
Our creative director, Jeremiah, one of the other founders of Fifth Cell, he wanted to do a sort of like a game where you built your city, built your castle. The original concept actually used smaller blocks, like 1x1 blocks. So and this was a couple years before like the whole Minecraft thing started. The publisher at the time said there was a stupid idea to use 1x1 blocks, and so we essentially had to switch to kind of bigger chunks, bigger pieces. We wanted to do a game, that was about building, it's about defending. It sort of mixed the, those two genres together.
And where did the whole clockwork motif come from?
I don't know. I don't want to spoil the story for people who haven't played it, but it definitely, there's definitely reasons why we went with the clockworks. As an anime, like being able to tie them into the main character and sort of the supporting cast. It allowed us to do some twists that wouldn't have been possible otherwise.
Right. So before I continue my own line of questioning, I know my colleagues had some questions about Locke's Quest here.
Sure.
Well, one of them has kind of been answered by just looking at the what's playing right now, but I was curious as to if there were any challenges involving translating it from the DS that had a dual screen and like how that worked. And it looks like most of the gameplay was on the touch screen, and the top screen was mostly used for status and overview. So I guess that would be fairly easy to translate, right?
Yeah. It wasn't too hard. It's like translating. I think the most difficult part of any port, if you're going DS to another platform, is controls. The DS with the stylus is pretty unique in terms of its control scheme. So we definitely had to spend a good amount of time, figuring out the right control scheme. And then, we ended up doing console as well. And so we sort of had these separate control schemes. We had the keyboard, mouse, and then we had the controller. So.
Yeah, I think controller would probably be the hardest to do because keyboard and mouse translate stylus fairly well.
Yeah. It's interesting. At the end, we ended up where using the build mode I feel is best with keyboard, mouse, and I end up having a little bit more fun with the battle mode on the controller. So it's kind of like a weird thing where half the game works pretty well keyboard, mouse, and half the game works best on on controller. But I think we got to the point where, both control schemes work fine.
That probably wasn't the easiest balance in the world, but along the lines of the remastering, how did you deal with like the art assets and such? Because the DS has a fairly small resolution, and you're bringing all that stuff into high definition.
Yeah. So the pixel art, like I feel like pixel art is one of the more timeless sort of art styles. It's like you see it today. You see a ton of like great pixel games. You saw it, 10, 15 years ago. You saw it on
good pixel
SNES.
art anyway.
Yeah, good pixel art. And so, we had an incredible pixel artist at Fifth Cell who did, all the art for Drawn to Life and Lux Quest. And, we worked with some, great animators, Paul Robertson. So, I think the art was great. It was, for us, I guess the moment of truth was, bringing it up to, a TV resolution and seeing if it still held together. And, I think it did pretty well. All the UI was all pixel, and so all that had to be redone. We also had, if you look at the portraits on the screen, they're like severely kind of cut down pixelated versions of what were beautiful, like high def source reference images. And so we had all those source images, and then we just ended up using those in the game. So, there's a lot of real high resolution art done for the game that didn't go in. And, so we kind of got to show that, whether it's in the portraits or in some of the, like the achievement art, some of the Xbox achievement stuff. So that was cool.
That's certainly interesting and certainly handy because, had you had to work from the other end, this wouldn't have looked too good.
No.
Yeah, especially because a lot of games from this time frame, they're missing their original assets. So if they want to redo it, they'd have to rebuild it from scratch.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I suppose since we're talking about the remaster now, we should switch over to the remastered footage. Or do you want to play the trailer?
I have the trailer. I don't have any other footage because this has gameplay in it too.
Okay, go with the trailer.
All right.
Give him a sec as he switches.
I'm gonna play the audio through. So.
I wonder how these play out in the audio version because, people can see the screen here. So. Oh well. This is the version we make for these days. Right then. So getting back into the line of questioning, before we get back into the game, I suppose we should ask how you went from Fifth Cell to Digital Continuum.
I was in New York actually. I was sort of in the process of starting up a New York studio for Fifth Cell. And then I lost some projects, which happens to devs all the time, unfortunately. And I talked to the other owners out in Seattle, and they were interested in sort of doing something smaller that was out there. And so I said, I kind of feel like it's time to start a new studio, and started a new studio in New York.
And how is the New York development scene? It's not a place we hear about too often because, well, most game devs are on the West Coast.
That's true. I'd say it's actually a lot. It's a lot better than I thought it was when I came here. There's a pretty strong indie scene. Some really good schools, NYU. Their Game Center program is really good. A couple of bigger devs, Avalanche is here. There's some smaller, medium tier mobile devs. But I feel like it's sort of up and coming. I always say that it's like, do you want to be a small fish in a big pond, or big fish in a small pond? And they both have their pros and cons. And then on the West Coast, in Seattle specifically, there's just tons of great studios, and they're all sort of competing for the same pool of talent. And while there's a lot of talent out there, there's also a lot of companies recruiting. And in New York, it's I feel like you find people who they really want to stay in New York, and they're much more willing to, join a smaller company, to sort of work in games and stay in New York.
Like I said, I can see that because it's probably a bit, in spite of like the size of New York City, it's probably a bit more tight knit of a community.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how did you get attached to this Lox Quest remastering or remake or whatever you want to call it?
We had just started the new company, and I knew the biz dev guy at Nordic Games, and we had talked over the years about maybe doing some Lox Quests, and he reached out and said they were thinking about doing it, and I had worked on it. A couple of the other people at the studio had worked on it before, and so we sort of talked about it, and it made sense. Sort of, it was like our first project.
Yeah, THQ Nordic seems to be on a remastering bent. As they've got several such projects like Lox Quest going on, or they've just recently released. But on the subject of actually bringing the game to the high definition, systems and everything, making it for one screen, was that an easy process?
Yeah, like you said, the top screen from Lox Quest was UI, and so it's sort of about taking the UI, repositioning it, and then the bottom screen was where the gameplay was. There was definitely challenges, and like the maps at the time were not built; they were built to be, a certain amount of screen to be shown at once. So there was a lot of, we had to completely rebuild all the maps, make them bigger, extend them. It's like even with the camera panning, we had to redo all the cinematics too. We essentially rebuilt the game. We had the original as reference, but we rebuilt the game, from scratch.
That's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun doing it a second time.
Well, how many people worked on this, and how long did development last?
There's about 5 of us. And development took maybe about 6 months, I'd say.
That sounds appropriate for a project of this scale. And speaking of the remastering, I think a thing we haven't touched upon yet is the music. Did the music require any remastering? Because once again, it was built. It was music probably made for the S.
So the audio guy, Dave, is actually part of the new company, and so it was music was the easiest part because he had done it before, and so he went and did it again, and he did remaster. He did have the source, some of the original source files. So, but yeah, he did go through and remaster all the tracks and update some of the sounds.
I'm sure that probably helped. Yeah, that certainly helps the development process.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I'm actually really impressed that so much of the source remained for this game.
Yeah, that's the thing is like a lot of times like you very rarely see the devs or people from the original dev team be the ones to remake games. Like it's usually just another studio who it's like work for hire, and so I think when you have the original dev there, there were so many times where the people who hadn't worked on the game would ask me like, well, what, I don't understand, like why is this way, or what's going on here, and being able to sort of answer those questions I think helped a lot.
Yeah, that actually came up in our interview with THQ Nordic last year. We talked about the Darksiders remasterings, and they mentioned like with War Mastered Edition, one of the reasons why they had so many problems putting that out because they didn't have the source code there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So was it a straight porting, or was there anything added to this version?
Yeah, I did a little bit of my George Lucas special editions treatment. There was a couple scenes that I'd scripted originally that after the game came out and playing it, like there was just little bits and pieces that I was like, you know what, if I, had another chance, like there's just things that I would want to put in. And so there's a couple slight modifications to some of the scenes that, make, connect the story a little bit better. We actually went through and removed some of the stuff we had on DS. We felt the game pacing. The original game was just a little bit too long. It was originally 100 days, and that sounds impressive. And back then, with DS, it was all back a box, and the bigger the number, the better. But it didn't make for the best game, and so we went through and we took out some of the days from some of the areas, and I feel the pacing is a lot better. We added a new mode, like a endless mode. In Tony Defense, where you can pretty much see how long you last against just more and more and more enemies. Yeah, those are pretty much the big changes.
Like, I'm like, sounds like something that's noticeable, but not. They sound minor in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't impact. I mean, the game. The game was great, and so our goal is really to preserve that. It's just when you sort of get a second chance, there's just small things that you'd like to change, and so we got to change some of those.
Right, and so I suppose we should talk about like what is the days mechanic?
So sort of like there's days, and then there's campaigns. And so, each campaign is over the course of like a different map. And, each campaign can have anywhere from, I don't know, 3 to like 5 or 6 days. And so those days are split up. Sometimes there's like cutscenes in between. There's different objectives on different days. But essentially, like, once you're done with, those set of days, you sort of move on to the next map.
Regardless if you've like completed your objectives or not?
No, you have to complete your objectives. Each build, the time varies, but you basically have a set amount of time to build your defenses, and then once you're done with that, or the time expires, you go right into battle mode. And so battle mode is also timed, and so you usually anywhere from like 2 to 4 minutes, depending on the actual day. You just have to survive. And the waves sort of get increasingly hard as the day goes on, and so you sort of, a lot of times you'll end up just barely beating the day.
Yeah, that sounds like a tower defense game to me.
Yeah.
It's like certainly brings back memories.
Yeah.
So, were there any particular difficulties bringing this game to consoles or the PC? Unforeseen?
PC wasn't too bad. Consoles, I don't think it was anything about this game, but I think just console development in general is more challenging. There's a lot of certification requirements. There's a lot of sort of tribal knowledge that, if you've never shipped a game or multiple games on console, like you're learning a lot. And so, I think console was challenging, but, both platforms at the end turned out pretty well.
And are they the same game in terms of resolution, frame rate, all that stuff on all 3 platforms?
Yeah, the only difference is the controller, yeah, which, there's controller support on PC too, so, but on console, obviously, it's mandatory.
Right. With the PlayStation 4 controller, was there any thought to using the touchpad?
No, I don't know. Like I feel like I feel like the game, like it just the precision touch of the stylus was something just unique to it at its time, and the mouse comes close to it as well. But I don't think any of the touchscreens or the sort of like movement mechanics on any of the consoles would be good enough for the game.
Okay. And finally, were there any? I'm not sure if you can speak on this or not, but did the Nintendo Switch enter the conversation in regards to Locke's Quest at any point?
I mean, the Switch was announced pretty late. I mean, we were just about done with the game, you know. And as for future platforms, I would guess it depends on the success of this, you know, all these versions.
I suppose that makes sense. Any final questions regarding Locke's Quest here?
No, it looks interesting, and I'd say that as someone who's not really a big fan of tower defense. So
yeah, I'd say
it might
be
might be the aesthetic blinding me because I really liked Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, but it still looks like a pretty fun game.
Yeah, it isn't like, you know, for as defined by a gamer, like it really isn't tower defense. You know, it isn't about sort of like upgrading and maximizing, like, you know, the right combination. Like it really is much closer to a strategy, you know, sort of like an action strategy. You know, but I'd say too, like the you know, the thing that a lot of people are blown away by is the story, like the RPG, you know, the cinematics in it. I mean, it's got probably like 70 to 100 separate 2D cutscenes, you know, pretty wide cast of characters. I mean, the story's got a good, you know, a lot of twists. It's pretty unique, original. So, you know, if you're a fan of RPGs, you know, I'd say like I wouldn't let the tower defense thing stand in the way of giving it a try.
Sounds good. And can you speak about anything in regards to future projects at this point, or not?
Our studio, we're going to be announcing our next game in the summer, but that's the most I can say. But yeah, there's stuff in the works for sure.
Okay. Well, I certainly look forward to hearing about it, and hopefully we can have you back on the program when you're able to talk about that.
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay. Well, the game is Locke's Quest. I think it's going for what, $15 on Steam, or on all platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you know, it's on sale right now. $11.99, at least on Steam.
Yep.
So, you know, looks interesting. Wish we had gotten reviewed codes for the game, but that's kind of beyond, you know, anyone's control here. So it goes. Anyway, Petty Fan, play us to the next segment. All right. Welcome to the topic of discussion. This week we're talking about Rayman and the Rabbids. Actually,
oh man.
Well,
Ray,
actually, when we were talking about this subject on Sunday, this is probably going to be split into two parts because, honestly, there's a lot to cover. You know, if we're talking about Rayman and the Rabbids. Now, we kind of decided on this because of the leaked Ubisoft you know, Mario Rabbids crossover insanity.
Yeah, still waiting to. I mean, obviously, when it actually gets officially announced and stuff, maybe we'll have a little more knowledge about how this is supposed to make sense. But
I'm like, from what like more details have come out, and well, a lot of this is because of Ubisoft. You know?
Yeah, and I don't think Nintendo's very happy about that because when this is supposed to be an E3 title, or at least announced during E3.
No, I imagine Nintendo isn't very happy about the leaks, but yeah, the leaks happen because this is an Ubisoft title, and Ubisoft titles leak all the fucking time.
Ubisoft is like a sieve.
I mean, jeez, the amount of detail that's been leaking about this game is pretty unreal.
Enough to get a man fired if they find out who it is.
Probably.
No doubt about it.
But yeah, it's like also from, like I said, from the most recent leak, it's like the idea was Ubisoft's. They've been kind of the guiding force on the whole project, yada yada yada, which makes sense because only fucking Ubisoft would push a game with the rabbits in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Also, what they're doing with Princess Peach.
Yeah, it's like
it's not that Nintendo doesn't wouldn't cross Mario over with things, but I don't think Rabbids would be on the list, especially just cosplay Rabbids.
Yeah, I think they'd be more likely to have a Mario and Rayman team up than Mario's crew and the Rabbids.
you know, like from what's been leaked, it's been said that Ubisoft went through the various channels in Nintendo and pitched this to them, and Nintendo liked it well enough to say yes. But in order to I'm like not necessarily understand the Rabbids because there's not much to understand about
Yeah, I
them.
was about to say, one does not simply understand the Rabbids.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, that was kind of the appeal of the Rabbids. And yes, believe it or not, these things have actual appeal. I'm like, I know this because
Sounds
they were
fake, but okay.
It sounds well. They were never
I'm
intended. Yeah, well, it's like they were never intended to be this. I hesitate to say mega franchise. I don't think the Rabbids ever reached like Assassin's Creed levels, but
Or Minions, for that matter.
possibly. I mean, I guess it's kind of fairly hard to gauge because the Rabbids are a fairly successful franchise, but they were never meant to be the stars. This is all connected with a game called Rayman's Raving Rabbids. They were invented to be, the next antagonists in the Rayman series, basically. Like, but the success, but this it's not only the fact that Rayman's Raving Rabbids was mega popular. Like, we'll dissect that game in particular later, but the Rabbids quickly overshadowed Rayman because, well, they had very bizarre and quirky personalities, and it turns out that along with their design is fairly marketable. And
Insofar as you could make like a plush toy of them, or more likely a vinyl abomination.
A shitload of merchandise, a television show. The Rabbids have done pretty good for themselves. They were still attached to Rayman for a little while there, but after the third game, they were spun off into their own thing entirely.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and they've been getting steady work ever since. Maybe not amazing sales like 14 million for the original Rayman Raving Rabbids because that hit an ultra hot console at launch, and it was in the right place at the right time, basically. But before the Rabbids, there was Rayman, and it's actually kind of surprising that we haven't talked about Rayman up to this point.
Well, he hasn't been that popular lately. I mean, he's had a couple of games recently, but
yeah, I'm gonna stop you right there because he's probably the most underrated platforming mascot going, in the sense that he is still going. Like, he managed to survive the halcyon days of the 90s.
Yeah. From what I can remember, him and Sonic are the only two who really made it out.
I'm not saying he's not still going. I'm just saying he's not as prominent.
Well, here's the thing. Rayman was never that prominent, if I'm being honest.
I mean, he got his start on, what was it, the Atari Jaguar?
Yeah.
Yes, his very first game was actually made on the Atari Jaguar, mainly because of, it had better hardware than the 16-bit systems, but this, when development started, this is before the 32-bit consoles really hit the market. So, they picked their poison. But it should be noted that Rayman was quickly ported to other systems. The first game saw releases on the Sega Saturn, PlayStation, MS-DOS. Initially, there's actually a couple of PC versions of the first game. And that's actually important because generally considered to be the definitive edition is Rayman Gold. Which had like all of the content, and most importantly, it had a level editor. Now,
which is a thing for a platformer like that, because the level designs in this game are not particularly blocky, because that's the easiest kind of level editor to include. Like, that's one of the notable problems with Super Mario Maker, for example, is that it doesn't do crap for slopes.
I'll be honest, I don't know how the level editor. I honestly don't know how the first game fares because I didn't play that one. It's just one of the things that got missed. But it's probably one of the best looking. It's one of the best looking platformers from its era. Like even today, it looks fairly impressive because, well, it's got hand-drawn 2D art and all that stuff. And as it turns out, that ages a lot better than other, not just 3D, but, the computer-modeled 2D games of the era.
Mm-hmm.
To tie it back to Super Mario RPG there. But, yeah... that is the thing about Rayman. Like, he was never super popular.
Mm-hmm.
At least, obviously he got good enough in the way of sales to continue on. But, he certainly wasn't mentioned in the same breath as Mario or Sonic or, even newer mascots like Crash Bandicoot or Spyro the Dragon. But, he has persisted throughout the decades. Like, Rayman's been going on a 20-year career here. And, yeah, there's been some rocky points. But there's definitely an appeal here that's, that belies the understatements. That is to say, I think one of the reasons why Rayman as a character has survived is because design-wise, he's pretty unique. It's like, first of all, he stands out from the 90s mascot crowd because he's not another fucking animal.
Yeah, Rayman is very much a what the crap is that? He doesn't have arms, legs, or a neck. He has weird hair things.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of a big old bean nose, like some cartoon things have, but he's definitely not a cool name the animal.
Yeah, I'm like, he's a what's-its creature.
Mm-hmm.
And further pontificated by the fact that he has no connective tissue. Like he has hands but no arms. He's got feet but no legs. He's got a head but no neck. Now, this is some Homestar Runner proportions, if I'm being honest here.
Dear Rayman, how do you wear clothes with no arms or legs?
More
That's
importantly,
a goddamn line, you know. It's a
it's like,
goddamn line, you know it, because Homestar doesn't have arms. Well, he has arms, you just can't see them. There's something there, we just don't know exactly.
Yeah. It's like, in the case of Rayman, we're not even sure if he has hands or they're just gloves. Or feet and shoes.
Yeah, his shoes don't seem to have any openings either.
It's, he's a weird character. And, I think that simultaneously made him kind of unmarketable. But also,
Yeah, even if he looks like nothing like a hedgehog, you could still sell Sonic the Hedgehog as he's a hedgehog who rolls up in a ball and goes really fast. With Rayman, he's a thing that can shoot off his hands because he doesn't have any arms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah. So.
And his supporting cast is equally strange, mostly.
Yeah. This is true. Yeah, it's like I can't say how much of the supporting cast was in the first game because once again I never played it. But as in regards to the first game, from everything I've heard of, it's apparently a really hard game. Especially for the era. Like I said, I don't have too much more to say about the first game because, where Rayman probably made his biggest impact, maybe not to date, but as a platformer, was probably Rayman 2, The Great Escape. Quite simply, Rayman 2 is considered to be one of the greatest 3D platformers of all time. And I'm not being hyperbolic about that. And I've played Rayman 2 quite extensively. And yeah, it's up there all right. In fact,
what system was that one on?
Everything.
Nintendo 64.
Yeah. Rayman 2,
Okay.
Rayman 2 actually had an interesting release history because it first showed up on the Nintendo 64 and Windows in '99. But that's not the version you really hear about. If you're talking about the versions from you're probably going to hear most about the Dreamcast version. Kind of considered to be the definitive version of the initial releases. But I'd say the true definitive release was the PlayStation 2 version. Because that was the last one of the, that had every new version of Rayman had some new stuff added. And this one had all the previous enhancements, had new mini games, had new music, had new bosses, had a lot of new stuff added. I suppose the biggest problem with this is it was less of a frame rate. It was 30 FPS versus the 60 FPS of the Sega Dreamcast version. Also, I think the thing I remember about the PlayStation version was that one had normal speech added. Rayman and company could talk normally because the Dreamcast and the N64 versions used Banjo-Kazooie talk, for lack of a better term.
Partly because speech is really data intensive, and it's much easier to do on discs than it is on cartridges.
Well, Dreamcast used discs.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not doesn't. It's also not like the Banjo-Kazooie speak doesn't fit the aesthetic of the series.
Yeah. But I mean, this is also where we get introduced to Glowbox, Murphy, the Teensies, and a lot of Rayman's universe is established with this game now. And I'm it's also one of the few platformer one of the few games that I played that I remember having really good swimming controls. Now,
In 2D or 3D?
3D.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, and it really is a very well crafted platformer. And I know Ubisoft thinks the same of this because they've released this game as is on a couple of a couple of times. I'm not just talking about like the initial release window. There's they actually released it twice for the DS family. There's Rayman DS and there's Rayman 3D. Unfortunately, bringing a 3D platformer, raw and naked to, especially like the DS, is a bad thing going because no analog controller.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Rayman 3D, from what I understand, didn't fare much better.
Yeah, 3D with digital or only 4-directional controls is tricky.
But it's it's definitely worth buying on GOG. At the very
Which
least,
I think you said all of the Rayman games that are available online are only on GOG and not on like Steam or anything.
Yeah, for some reason Steam doesn't have the older releases. Like, now Rayman 3. Once again, that's not a platformer I've played. A big reason was, pretty much all I saw, every review I saw of the game mentioned it was a step down from Rayman 2 in terms of design and so on and so forth. And it definitely seems like, now I'm unsure if it's because of the changes done in Rayman 3. Like, apparently it's also a lot lighter in tone. Like, see, I wish these games were on Steam so I could get them. I stopped buying games on GOG because I realized I'd never get to them. But anyway, I mentioned Rayman 3 here in passing because, well, we are running short on time, but it's also, this is kind of where the franchise stalled for a while. From what I remember reading, Rayman 3 was considered to be a disappointment sales-wise.
And a lot of platformer franchises, it's not rare for them to like hit a rough patch.
Yeah, especially keep in mind, we're still, this came out in 2003, early 2003 at that. This is still like the final heyday of platforming, the 3D platformers. As in, there's still a shit ton of 3D platforms games coming out, and Rayman, in spite of the notoriety and pedigree he had, still wasn't that popular of a mascot. And though in spite of that, there's also I'm kind of glossing over some games here because even if he didn't have like top tier platforming mascot levels of fame, he certainly had enough of it to garner spin-offs. And yes, he had quite a few of the requisite spin-offs. He had a kart racing game. He had a golf game. He had a really weird game in Rayman Arena. Which was this, it was kind of like, I think they were kind of going for Mario Party, but I'm honestly not sure. Anyway, this kind of brings us full circle into Rayman Raving Rabbids. So this game was actually initially built as the fourth Rayman game, and indeed it was supposed to be like not just a a proper Rayman sequel, but a proper platform game. But and the idea got changed because of the Nintendo Wii. It should bear mentioning that the original version of Rayman Raving Rabbids actually hit a lot of platforms, but you only remember the Wii version because we've been talking around it.
It was designed for the Wii with a lot of Wii features, wasn't it?
Yes. It was basically a test bed for all the Wii motion control, because it's the fucking patient zero of Wii mini game collections. Every fucking shitty mini game collection that hit that system, you can pretty much blame on Rayman's Raving Rabbids. I know that's a hefty thing to lay at one game, but you gotta understand, this was the mini game collection that came out at launch. It was there day one, November 2006. And it sold 14 million units. I'm like,
also known as a lot.
yes. And given how well it meshed with the Wii's audience and the Wii's controls, is it any wonder that every company in the goddamn universe jumped on this trend? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. The answer is no. No, it is not a surprise. And indeed, Ubisoft, brought a shit ton more to the field, But I suppose the best thing that could have happened to Rayman was getting overshadowed by the Rabbids. Because, had Rayman remained the star, he may have been trapped, in all of the shitty mini game collections instead of just like 3 of them.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that let Rayman be in good games like what's its name? Is it Legends?
Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends. We'll briefly touch upon this because, I guess actually we'll save this for next week. Because I think Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends deserve their own section, and we still haven't really talked about the Rabbids themselves yet.
Yeah.
So, more on that next week, because we're trying to keep our show times at a specific set, because I don't think we've talked about this, but we've actually been having troubles uploading the audio version of this broadcast to our TalkShoe site.
Yeah, with the improved sound quality brought to you by not using TalkShoe, the file size goes up to a little bit too high for TalkShoe if we go for too long, and we haven't figured out how to downsample that yet.
Well, the methods I try to downsample it with, it rips out the audio entirely. That's kind of bad for an audio version.
Yeah, there's probably a program that could do it, but we don't know which one.
Yeah, it's like, we'll work on this later, maybe during the off season if it comes to it. But like right now, we don't have time to deal with it. So, I think our hard limit is what, an hour 45?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're ending things here because of that. And on that note, coming up on the week ahead, like I'm pretty sure Petty Fan doesn't. Do you have the MSP stuff in front of you, or
I will pull that up.
Yeah.
I
All right,
keep
coming
forgetting
up.
her last name, so yeah, let me pull that up.
Yeah, that'd be good to look up.
Okay, I
But
have it.
all right. So coming up on an MSP. Right?
Tonight we have Jackie Woolnhouse of Between Two Failures, and I'm sorry if I butchered that.
Oh, yes. So coming up on Fragments Silicon for the week ahead, we got 2 reviews happening this week. We had a bit of a review hitch. I think we announced that we were going to review X-Field Paintball 3 this week. That's been delayed to next week for a variety of issues, not the least of which we actually had a code expiry thing that just got fixed. So, it was enough for me to say I'm moving it to next week. So, coming up this week, we're reviewing, first of all, Stick It to the Man. This one's actually been in the queue for about a month and a half. Reason it got delayed so long is this is a game from like 2014. It was one of those.
It's not an urgent new release.
No, it's like it was more. We casually mentioned to the developer that we hadn't played this game. They're like, "You want some codes?" I'm like, "Sure, we'll review it." It's just with a game this old, priority wasn't placed on it until enough space has been cleared to review it, and that's happened here. And our second game is a game called Cooking Witch. It's from, I'm not sure if it's from the developer, but it's from the publisher of Plantera. Although it doesn't play a lot like Plantera. I'll be honest.
I would imagine not.
Yeah. I'll be honest, this review is probably going to be pretty short because it's one of those games, you play it for 15 minutes, you've pretty much seen the game. Not maybe all to it, but you've pretty much got the game down. And I've been talking to the guys. I'm not sure if this is a game Naka would love or hate because on the one hand, it's got Tiny Witch, but on the other hand, she's doing some pretty fucked up things. Seriously, it's kind of disturbing. More on that on Sunday. Now, so next week we do have 2 interviews planned. June 6th, Tuesday morning. I'll probably remind you guys later in the week. And, Monday. We'll be having Steve Philby of Motion Twin on the program. They're developing a game called Dead Cells. It's a Metroidvania platformer with roguelike elements in it. Yeah, roguelike is a thing that we've been encountering a lot on the show lately, if you hadn't noticed. The game looks really good though. Still waiting to hear back from them on confirmation. So we'll see how that goes. And on June 7th, we have Richard Nava of Happy Badger Games. They just released their first project in a game called Smugglecraft. So I'm laughing because guess what elements this game has?
Monster race.
Crafting.
I'm like, not just that, but it's got roguelike. Yeah. Yeah. You've got okay, so here's the pitch. You've got a fast hovercraft and a heavy debt. Also, the world is falling apart. As a smuggler in a society in which travel, trade, and technology is highly regulated and virtually inaccessible for most, your deliveries could decide the fate of the world. With an immersive roguelike narrative featuring multiple endings, combined with an epic hovercraft driving mechanics, Smugglecraft plays like no racing game ever before. So yeah, it's kind of an adventure racing game roguelike thing. there needs to be a study done on the variants of roguelikes at this point, because shit's just getting fucking crazy. No, but like, also, hopefully we'll get review codes for this game. I'll note Dead Cells is in early access. We might get codes for it. I actually haven't asked yet because I'm still waiting on confirmation. But even if we do, we don't review early access games. Like, game has
At least not while they're still early access.
Yeah, it's like game has to be done for us to review it. Just open policy there. Right. So on that note, until next time, which is in about a half an hour, I shall wish you good gaming.